Thank you very much for joining us, Olufemi Lawson. It's a pleasure having you on Sahara TV again this morning.
Good morning.
Nigerians frequently wake up to new allegations of corruption that involve vast sums of money. And recently, Nigerians were miffed and distraught when they heard about the details of spending of the NSITF, the Nigerian Social Trust Insurance Trust Fund, failing to justify the spending of the sum of 17.158 billion, and alleging that the documents containing proof of the expenditure have been eaten up by termites. Termites. I mean, how ridiculous is this? What's your reaction to this, sir?
Well, thank you. Good morning again for having me. And it's very unfortunate. And I think this is one of the many tragedies that has befallen Nigeria as a nation. We should really be worried because if you even look at the NSITF as an agency, what is supposed to be its responsibility is an agency that ordinarily should keep in trust, funds belonging to workers, as far as the social insurance is concerned while working. But sadly, this has become another, institution of corruption. If you recall that as we speak, the former executive secretary of the commission is still on the run, who was executive secretary between the time of 2013 and 2015. She's still on the run. And Olufemi, who, of course, record shows perpetrated huge sums of funds under the administration. And while we thought all that was going to end with 2015, with the emergence of the new administration, which came on the altar of change, and also the promises to fight corruption, this never abated. And unfortunately, we are having more alarming situation. It is in this same country that we have had, snake swallowing large sums of money, but now termites eating document in 2022 that such an institution that is entrusted to manage social insurance funds cannot have electronic documentation of its expenditures, that we have to rely on pencil and paper that has now been burnt, most likely, by some characters who now claim that termites have consumed. How should an insurance institution be so careless and fraudulent to the extent that it cannot even insure its own assets, as talk less of insuring the lives of Nigerian workers? It is sad, and it tells you how monumental corruption has become in the system. It tells you how sad we should ordinarily be as Nigerians, because this is just unimaginable.
How ridiculous, I mean, is it to just, claim for an agency like that to just claim that termites eat? I mean, earlier on you talked about this country has actually been, taken for granted. You heard about snakes and monkeys. I mean, getting blamed for corruption in the country, animals making away with huge sum of money. Isn't it ridiculous? I mean, in this century.
You see, it's most ridiculous. And you see, it's a big indictment, particularly on an administration whose leader is, supposedly supposed to be an anti-corruption star, a man who was known or who is said to have, used all his entire career to fight corruption, to detest corruption. You see, while we have corruption being perpetrated by successive administration in Nigeria, what the current administration has done is to institutionalize corruption rather than institutionalizing agencies that will fight corruption. In fact, corruption has become so endemic to the extent that it has become like a national policy. And that is why you find this ridiculous kind of claims by agencies of government that ordinarily, and do you know the unfortunate thing, why I said corruption has become institutionalized? Nobody, as we speak, have been sanctioned for coming to the public to say such ridiculous thing, make such ridiculous claim on behalf of the government. They are out there still living their lavish life, still, of course, working under the same president who ordinarily Nigerians expected was coming to tackle headlong the menace of corruption. And that is to tell you that the president himself have no intention from the onset to tackle corruption. And that is why corruption rates between to the time they took over 2015 and now has also heightened to the extent that our rating, even the Transparency, Transparency International, rating, has gone to a very ridiculous extent, more than we ever witnessed, even while we thought the previous administrations were corrupt. It is very sad, and the government, particularly the president, does not feel any remorse about this, does not show any concern about this. At no time will you see this president coming out publicly. In the past, we have seen ministers start, for merely, conducting themselves in manners that are against public service ethics and the like. Minister of Education, the Minister of Health in this country was sacked on the basis of having mismanaged about 29 million naira or thereabout. But today you have common appointees, head of agencies, mismanaging billions of common taxpayers' funds, and the president seems to be so comfortable that he does not even make statements, talk less of taking drastic steps about it. And that is to tell you that the administration actually came to institutionalize corruption rather than fighting it.
Now, Femi Lawson, help us get this into proper context. How has this allegation, these claims, how has this damaged the legitimacy of this government? And to what extent will this weaken the social fabric of this society?
See, very sad to the extent that, for a government that has shown gross incompetence in every other aspect of life, in security, in economy, in education, our investors have been short for so many months now, just because the government cannot meet the basic demand of university teachers. That tells you that such government in any way cannot even talk about fighting corruption, which is one of the cardinal, policies that the party APC came to campaign with in 2015 while it was coming into power. Sadly, even if this government cannot tackle corruption the way we have expected as Nigerians, one would have expected that this government was going to at least, limit it maybe to where it was before 2015, not heighten it like we're currently experiencing. It has not only damaged our national fabric, it has damaged the psychology of the average Nigerian, the psyche of the average Nigerian. It is so bad to the extent that the average young person in Nigeria is seeking opportunity to get into that platform and also still massively loot, because nobody is being, punished for the monumental corruption that is currently witnessed within the system. It is so sad to the extent that the generation of our young people are no longer interested in hard work, because government is daily proving to us that you don't necessarily need to be hardworking before you can make billions. All that is needed to be done is to be appointed into a parastatal of government, steal billions, and become an emergency billionaire. And that is one thing that the inability of the administration of President Buhari, inability of this regime to tackle corruption the way it promised, has imposed on us as Nigerians.
Now, many Nigerians are of the opinion that Nigerian government itself has not learned any lessons from other countries. I mean, what will have happened to a government official in China, for example, that's blamed animals for missing funds? And while other nations are striving to improve their GDP per capita as the welfare of their citizens by cracking down on corruption, how have Nigeria fared, and why have we not learned any lessons from other countries?
It looks like we are not learning any lesson because we have not, as a country, been able to criminalize corruption. Until we criminalize corruption to the extent that people see it as a capital offense, people see it as somebody that will bring eternal shame to their reputation and their family names, until we begin to put that law in place, beyond all these laws that prescribe few jail time for looters and sometimes give them option of fine. In this country, we've seen the director sentenced for stealing over 2 billion naira, given an option of about 1 million naira fine to evade going to prison. That is how unserious even the laws that we are using to fight corruption in Nigeria currently are. So until we begin to promulgate laws that really criminalizes corruption, that makes corruption look like armed robbery and other criminal offenses that nobody really want to associate with. Today, if there's an armed robber in the family, I can tell you that even when he comes home, people in the house do not want to relate with him openly, because everybody knows what the society think about armed robbery, what the law says about armed robbery. So, but today, if you find a man who is alleged or who is seen to have perpetrated corruption in the public service, or even the next thing you see is a rising welcome to his village, is given a chieftaincy title. It becomes, an emergency doctorate degree holder from one of these corrupt universities also. So until we now move to that level, that we have to criminalize corruption to the extent that it will not be seen as mere misappropriation of government resources and all sort of phonetics, and used to describe it. We need to make corruption criminal. Let it be corruption. Don't let us give all this mismanagement, embezzlement, and all these funny nomenclatures to it any longer. Then people begin to become careful, conscious of the names their children will bear, conscious of the name of their family, conscious of how the society will treat them, isolate them like lepers. Until we begin to put those laws in place, I think we may not be going anywhere, especially when you look at the damage that has been done to the system in 2015 and now.
You're talking about laws, which you've actually highlighted. What is actually wrong with the stringent, so-called stringent anti-corruption laws we currently have? What should be done, and what are your organizations, for example, the Center for Public Accountability, doing with regards to ensuring that there are stringent anti-corruption laws, empowering anti-corruption institutions, and getting citizens involved to curb corruptions?
Well, fundamentally, one thing that we must appreciate is the initiative of the administrations that created some of these anti-corruption agencies, the Obasanjo administration, ICPC, EFCC, other agencies to checkmate the corruption and official excesses within the system. But the sad reality is that for every law, including constitutions of the best societies in the world, they are always subjected to continuous review and improvement. And that is why it looks so much like these societies are working the way it should. There's no perfect society anyway. Every part of the world, we have cases of corruption being reported. China didn't start from where it is now. It is as a result of advancement and the willingness of the people to improve on their laws and, of course, the approach towards fighting corruption. But in our own case, when was the last time we ever review the enabling act of the EFCC, ICPC, under this democracy? When has stakeholders been engaged to review these laws? When have we been engaged to review policies about corruption in Nigeria? Until we begin to do this, the laws as they were are no longer enough, because these thieving elites are becoming more sophisticated day in, day out. Their approach to stealing is becoming, in this country, at no time have we ever heard of snakes swallowing money, termites eating document. So they are becoming so sophisticated in their, before we used to hear is a man signs a check or transfer money from the company's institution's account to his own private account. But now they have become so dynamic, they now steal money in foreign exchange, they now steal money through cronies, they now burn official documents, they now, so a lot of steps in the tendency of these corrupt individuals towards securing, and advancing in their trade. And that is why the state itself must advance in its approach at tackling corruption. You cannot continue to use the 1999-2003 law to tackle corruption in 2022. You must also improve, and that is why it is important that while we are condemning corruption, we should also continue to insist that government improves on our law. We should review some of these laws, including the EFCC and ICPC Act, and empower the institutions more. We should begin to look at, tribunals, special tribunals, to deal with cases of corruption. How can you take a man who has stolen so much money to court, grant him bail, and the case is there, waiting for 6-7 years? Why would have been able to influence so much part of the course of justice because of the so much money they have stolen? So we must look at a special tribunal for this case of corruption, review the existing laws, and of course, continue, like I say, in our national orientation and policy, criminalize corruption. It's beyond merely officially manipulating, or stealing. It should be seen as capital as it should. A lot of people who have been killed for armed robbery in this country never stole a percentage of what an assistant director, a permanent secretary, a director would have stolen in some of the ministries of government in Nigeria today. So that's why it is important that we criminalize corruption beyond what it is now.
Thank you. Well, Olufemi Lawson, what many countries are actually taking effective stride to tackle corruption? and seems this country seems to have failed in this regard. This is the final question. What are organizations like the Center for Public Accountability doing to ensure that instead of Nigerians being consigned to resignation and frustrations, are there any hope of a reversal of the trend?
Well, the only hope I think we have at hand now is to gather our strength together as Nigerians to look at how first we can change this set of characters in leadership. Because as long as it is these same characters that are in leadership, the ability to amend our laws, the ability to effect some of the changes that are institutional, that has to do with legislation, that has to do with government policies, will become difficult because these are the primary beneficiaries of corruption. So as civil society, as citizens, we have the first duty, especially as we approach the 2023 general election, to ensure that we elect credible leaders into the national assemblies, into the state assemblies, into the governors and presidential positions, in order to have those that will have the integrity, the willingness to actually yield to our yearnings as Nigerians, because we can just remain outside clamoring for change, but if we don't also participate in the process of ensuring that we get the right leadership, it may take us, even though it may be achievable, but it may take us a longer period of time before we can achieve it. But with the right leaders in place, I can assure you that there will be cooperation between the citizens and the leaders, and it will be easier for us to get to come to a near end to some of these calamities, that are being imposed on Nigerians by this very corrupt ruling elite.
Olufemi Lawson, the Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability. It's a pleasure having you on Sahara TV. Thank you very much for your insightful analysis. Please do have a great day, sir.